here's your big one, and face it over toward there.
Okay, thank you. So some of those high-paid design consultants are in the room, Tom, Darwin. So any questions that you have, they're right there to answer those. That's what I pay them for. I stand between you and $100 cash, so I'm going to make this fast. And for those that don't win, it'll be a really sad drive home for all of us. So let's see if I do better than the last guy. So far, so good. So my background is in communications, I'm not a civil engineer, so when I do presentations, I like to organize them in a nice, neat fashion. So I'm going to talk to you first about our system, how we then leverage that system to pursue opportunities, and how all of that is guided by several different short and long-range plans rooted in our 20-year financial plan. Oh, see, I done screwed up. There we go. So let's start with our system. Hopefully, those that were out of town while you were here got a chance to test out our transit network. All right, there we go. So far, so good. So the DART system sits within, obviously, the larger North Texas. We serve 13 member cities who fund our services with using 1% sales tax. That's all governed by a 15-member board of directors. It's a 700 square mile service area serving over 2.6 million people. Like most agencies, we've kind of struggled over the last 2 years dealing with the pandemic and the loss of ridership. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of what that looks like from a ridership perspective, but we are seeing the benefits of some recovery there. Right now, we're at about 60% ridership. A little more background on our system. We got 95 bus routes, 93 miles of light rail. We also operate on-demand zones called GoLink zones. We have 65 light rail stations in addition to paratransit, and we operate the modern streetcar on behalf of the city of Dallas. Here's a quick look at our rail infrastructure. You'll see the TRE, which is a joint partnership with Trinity Metro and DART. The green line connects with DCTA going to the north at the Trinity Mills station. The dotted line going east to west is the Silver Line project, which is currently under construction. Talk a little bit more about that later, and then you see our various other light rail lines, all of those passing and intersecting in through downtown Dallas, which then we'll talk a little bit about D2 and the need for added capacity through downtown. So after the brief highlight of our system, let's talk a little bit about the opportunities that we have to leverage that system, really focusing on how do we improve the rider experience, how do we leverage innovation to improve mobility in our region, what type of service and expansion projects are we looking at, how do we work with our member cities and our regional council of governments to improve more sustainable land use and drive economic development around our stations, and then how do we collaborate with our regional partners. DART is just one piece of the North Texas puzzle, and so for us to be successful, we've got to collaborate with others beyond just what we do. And then again, I'll talk a little bit about some of the principles guiding all of that investment. So first, we'll start with the rider experience. Quick look at who's riding our service and how has that changed as we have gone through the last 2 years. When you look at the age of the riders have gotten older. They've gotten more diverse, and definitely during the pandemic, we saw a shift in the level of income of our riders. Most of the riders were higher percentage of lower income, and that's likely because we lost a lot of our commuters commuting into downtown Dallas for work opportunities, and so most of the people that are currently riding our service are really focused on service sector workers. The trip purpose continues to be work as the key driver for why people use transit. And I think that's an important factor as we think of how work recovers post-COVID. Do people continue to telework, and how does that impact transit service? How does that impact office development in the downtown core? And if you think about our D2 project, how does that impact or potentially delay our need for potential additional capacity through downtown? Ridership by mode. Bus is the highest percentage of ridership, and then next is light rail. And I think that's an important recognition that DART has done a really good job focusing on our light rail system over the history of the agency. We're now pivoting a little bit to focus on our bus rider, because if the rider experience is really good and we want to improve that, we've got to focus on the entire ridership community. And that's going to include increasing some investment in our bus services and the amenities around our bus stops. This slide, when I was looking at the demographics, I felt like this slide really tells the story that transit's been trying to tell over the last 2 years. Transit was a lifeline for the communities during the pandemic. If you see how our ridership shifted from 2019 to 2022, you see that the bulk of those people riding our service had no other options. They still had to get to work, they still had to get to the grocery store, they still had to get to the hospital, and DART was central to providing that lifeline service. And that is so true across not only the United States, but across the globe. So as we think about how to improve the rider experience, we need to understand maybe where we actually need to improve. That includes lack of cleanliness at both our rail and our bus stations, unreliable service, and some safety concerns. So what are we doing about it? We've spent a lot of time investing in DART Zoom, which was recently launched the end of January. We've improved our on-demand services to provide some first and last mile connections. We're working with our member cities to improve pedestrian access to our stations, focusing on some technology improvements to provide more accurate and timely information, and then improving system safety and security. Let's talk a little bit about mobility and innovation. One of the things you've heard the industry talk a little bit about the last probably 5 years is mobility as a service. And what DART is working to do is to not only leverage the public infrastructure and public assets to provide mobility, but provide connections to the private market, either through payment technology or connections to Uber and Lyft to improve trip opportunities for our customers. And we're also making sure that we think about that complete trip and how can we minimize the barriers to the complete trip from a technology perspective. And one step is the creation of mobility hubs. And we talk a little bit about it in our System 2045 plan, and LA Metro is a really good example of that. It's taking not only the transit infrastructure, it's providing kind of a one-stop shop for the end user. They can go to one transit center, they can access Uber, Lyft, bike, scooters, transit, and then there's shared technology resources as well. So one of the things that we're looking at through our Mobility 2045 plan is how can we leverage all of our bus and rail transit centers across our member cities to make this happen. So let's talk a little bit about projects that are underway or projects that are in development to expand our service. So new bus network redesign. If you're local, you've probably heard about DART Zoom, which launched at the end of January, and it was really focused on key corridors that could drive bus ridership, and then balancing that with service coverage by expanding the use of our on-demand service. What we did is we took 22 core networks where we have provided light rail-like bus frequencies, and then expanded where we maybe reduced some fixed route service, expanded our GoLink zones there. And so what we've really seen, tremendous growth in our ridership over the last 2 months as a result of these service improvements. We're still doing some tweaks. Whenever you do a massive redesign of anything, you're going to have some things that need to be worked out. So we're making some service tweaks that we'll be addressing over the next couple of months, and continue to monitor the performance of that service. But the result of this was improved travel times. We expanded the service throughout the time of day, increased the frequency, and then through that we also increased the job access. GoLink is the on-demand service that allowed us to really focus more fixed route service in those 22 key corridors, and then we expanded the GoLink service on demand to provide more door-to-door service in areas that had lower density. We are also wrapping up the Red and Blue Line platform extensions. We took 28 of our original stations and modified those to accommodate 3-car trains. 5 of those stations we also made level boarding, which will give us some flexibility as we start looking at our next generation of fleet. We are almost through with construction. If you ride our service, I know it's been a bit of a pain to navigate through But it really will provide us, additional operational flexibility. It's going to increase our passenger capacity and will allow us to operate longer trains through the entire system. Tom LeBeau's favorite project, the Silver Line, runs, I'm going to see how many times I can say your name. Runs between DFW connecting in with Tex Rail and then runs all the way to Shiloh Road to the east at Plano, passing through Capel, City of Dallas, Addison, Richardson, and Plano. It also provides connections to UT Dallas. It's been on our service plan for a while. We're really excited to have this project under construction and looking forward to it opening someday. Here's some pictures of the progress. This is the UTD station, the Addison station, and the City Line station. City Line's in Richardson. UTD is also in Richardson. Here is the Mercer Yard sewer relocation, always an exciting photo. And Explorer gas relocation, another exciting photo. I didn't pick these photos, so. And then here's the bridge columns over 75 in Richardson. The second major project underway is D2, the second alignment through downtown. Lots of history here. We've been working with the City of Dallas on this project for a while, recognizing that we needed to build some resiliency in how we moved through downtown for incident response. We also needed additional capacity so we can run more trains and have higher frequency. We have been working through a 30% design concept, but as we got to the end of that design, we had some concerns that we needed to address. So here's the current design at 30%, but at the east end, we ran into some problems. TxDOT with IH 345 have plans that are not as far as advanced as our plans. So we had to kind of figure out how to work nicely and navigate our design to avoid any impacts to their future design. There were also some developments in Deep Ellum that we're not really excited about us tunneling under them and resurfacing right next to them. So the city asked us to take another look, and we've ended up with this revised alignment that we're currently working through with the City of Dallas, TxDOT, and COG. So where does that stand? So as we're working through the agreement, we're working through agreements with COG, the City of Dallas, and TxDOT on how we're going to continue to advance this design. The alignment was spelled out on our service plan, so this will require a service plan amendment, and we will also have to do some additional 30% design and environmental, and then recognizing that this is in the city limits of Dallas and in downtown Dallas, we need to make sure that we're preserving as much right-of-way as we can so that we're not precluding our ability to build it. Future opportunities. So, D2 is probably a few years out. So what do we do between the Silver Line opening and D2? Well, there's a lot to be done. The infrastructure bill has provided some money. We're really excited about, the opportunities to modernize our system. DART is no longer a starter system. We've now, have to think about state of good repair. We have to replace our rail fleet. We're now looking at what is the next generation of light rail vehicles. We're looking at what's the next generation of vehicles on the TRE. And how do we make sure we're not just, building for today, but thinking about the future? How do we want to look at zero emissions bus technology to replace our bus fleet? And then as you think through all of those fleet replacements, that's going to drive facility planning to make sure that your maintenance facilities can accommodate a more modern fleet structure. How do we want to continue to improve our high capacity bus corridors? Does that look like some type of BRT treatment? We also want to make sure that we're thinking about sustainability and climate action and doing our part to minimize climate change. And then all of that's going to roll up into an agency strategic plan, which we'll be kicking off soon. I'll touch a little bit on transit-oriented development because this is a really great way for us to partner with our member cities to drive development around our station and to influence land use and ridership. Work closely with our service area cities, our local developers, and our Council of Governments. We've developed a transit-oriented development policy and program that really allows us to leverage our surface parking to work with member cities to drive more dense development. Here's some examples of where we're working through some transit-oriented development activities. Mockingbird Station is a great example of transit-oriented development today, and it continues to be an industry leader in how we do transit-oriented development. We're currently leveraging a partnership with a developer to build some parking garage capacity, not only for DART Station, but for the adjacent retail. There's a lot of exciting things happening at the City Line Station for both the existing light rail system and the future Silver Line system. And then downtown Plano is working with us as well. So collaboration, regional growth and development is part of my title. So I've got to look beyond just the 13 member cities to see how we can collaborate in this region. DART's 700 square miles of service area sits within a much larger region that is North Texas. And within that, you have the two major transit agencies, DCTA, Trinity Metro, and DART, that don't serve a lot of the population within the region. So we've really got to work with the Council of Governments and our regional mobility providers to make sure we're meeting the customers' needs and the travel needs. One example of that I was actually in Inland Port yesterday, and we operate GoLink zones in the Inland Port, but some of the Inland Port sits outside of DART service area in the southern part of Dallas County. Well, we provide service to the full Inland Port through a partnership with Star Transit. And so it's a really great example of how we can figure out how to solve a mobility solution, solve a mobility problem, even if it sits outside of DART's service area. Here's another example of collaboration. We're double tracking the Trinity Railway Express. This allows not only additional capacity for the TRE, but additional capacity for our freight partners that have trackage rights across the property. And we worked with the Council of Governments to submit the build grant, and we're successful and received funding for that. Another great example of collaboration, and I hate that Paul Christina had to leave from DCTA, but we are working with DCTA on a joint rail operations facility. They operate the Stadler GTWs on the A train. We will have Stadler Flirt vehicles. Their maintenance facility sits a few miles north of the Silver Line alignment. So we're actually going to be able to take the cars up north to the DCTA facility for heavy maintenance. So quick touch on some plans that guide our direction. Now that we've launched DART Zoom and the service redesign for our buses, we're going to now figure out where do we go from here and look at a 5-year plan to improve our bus system. We've got our 2045 system plan that was recently adopted that talks about different systems, programs, and partnerships. Here's another quick look at that. And this system plan is what kind of laid out those key themes that I touched on: the rider experience, mobility and innovation, service and expansion, land use and economic development, and collaboration. So with that, what questions do you have for Tom?